What's up, college football fans? Don't forget to check out and order your copy of Stiff Arming Football Myths, our latest football game plan book. So go on our website at footballgameplan.com/books and get your copy. We have these available in paperback as well as in PDF form.
Now let's start on some teams that are just on the outside of the top 25, and I actually like what Georgia Tech has done this year. 2 late game collapses are what's keeping them from being in the top 15 discussion, but make no bones about it, this is a very good football team. Minnesota had the game won last week versus Illinois, but a late fumble sealed their fate, and they'll get 3 consecutive weeks of strong tests in Iowa, Ohio State, as well as Nebraska. And if they're able to win all 3, they'll be back in the top 15 discussion. And what's not to like about the Clemson Tigers? Very talented team across the board. Even without freshman sensation quarterback Deshaun Watson, the Tigers are led by one of the best defenses in the country, and they have a big game in 2 weeks versus Georgia Tech. Now here's the top 25, starting with 11 through 25, and I'm a big fan of both Colorado State and Georgia Southern, 2 excellent football teams that no one right now wants to face. And when you look at number 21, LSU, I don't think they're that good of a football team. Yes, they knocked off Ole Miss, but this is still a football team that has some huge question marks, especially at the quarterback position when it pertains to consistency. Baylor's defense has to get it together for this team to move back into the top 10. And we look at Nebraska and East Carolina, they're playing some great football right now, especially on the offensive side of football. 2 excellent players in Amir Abdullah for Nebraska and quarterback Shane Carton for East Carolina, and 2 teams I think are heading in the right direction that are dangerous right now, and they're both coming out of the Big 12 Conference. That's West Virginia at 6-2 and TCU at 6-1, and they're having great play from the quarterback position with Clint Trickett of the Mountaineers and the Horned Frogs Trayvon Boykin. But defensively, you look at West Virginia, they did a great job last week versus Oklahoma State, shutting down a high-powered offensive attack, and it bodes well for them coming into this ball game versus TCU, who just are fresh off of putting up 82 points against Texas Tech. I think this will be an excellent football game, and they face off this weekend at 3:30 Eastern Time. But let's take a look at 2 intriguing teams here, starting with Marshall. The Thundering Herd have one of the best quarterbacks in the country, Rakeem Cato, and what doesn't get talked about as the real reason why they're undefeated is their defense. The Herd only gives up on average 16 points a game, which is 8th best in the country, and I can't knock them for strength of schedule because it's hard as hell to go undefeated in college football. A lot has to go right, and they've been firing on all cylinders since the start of the season. And no one is talking about the Duke Blue Devils. This is a team that could end up in their 2nd consecutive ACC championship game, which is unheard of for Duke football, and is the same with Marshall. Duke's defense is outstanding, 5th in the nation in points allowed, and good luck trying to throw the football against that secondary. The Blue Devils are for real, and they look strong the rest of the way this season. Now we get into the top 10. You look at 6 through 10. These are some very good football teams. You look at Ole Miss. They're fresh off a loss against LSU, but I tell you what, they may have the best defense in the country. I haven't seen a defense this aggressive, this nasty since those Miami Hurricane defenses of the late 90s, early 2000s, or even back further with those Florida State defenses. Every tackle that's made by Ole Miss is probably the hardest hit that you've ever seen this year in college football. You look at Georgia quietly sitting at 6-1. Notre Dame played an excellent game versus Florida State a couple of weeks ago, and Auburn still sitting there 6-1, still in the mix to get into the playoffs. They're a very good football team. That offensive misdirection game, their running game, is very tough to defend. Now let's go back and focus on the Utah Utes. Head coach Kyle Whittingham, after back-to-back 5-7 seasons, has once again built an intimidating squad on the defensive side of the ball. They're fast, they're aggressive, and they're tough to move the football against. Defensive end Nate Archard is one of the best defensive players in the land, and the Utes have a huge game this week versus Arizona State. Now let's move into the top 5, and as you can see, the Oregon Ducks at 7-1 are just on the outside looking in the 4-team playoffs. I have Alabama, Michigan State, Mississippi State, and Florida State. I actually think Ole Miss is a much better football team than Mississippi State, but the Bulldogs do have the better quarterback in Dak Prescott. And right now, Michigan State is a football team. Yes, they lost to Oregon earlier in the year, but this is a defense that no one wants to face, and offensively they're getting it into gear. They're playing with a little bit more consistency, and I think they're one of the better football teams in the nation. I would love to see them against a team like Alabama or Florida State because I love to see style differential and how they'll play against those squads. But when you look at Mississippi State and what they're doing right now, they're beating teams with execution. They're solid on the outside with receivers. They're getting great play from the defensive front seven, and they're well deserving of being in the top 5. Alabama is on fire right now. That offense, along along with their defense, is impressive. And if they can continue on this trek, they might find themselves at number 2 against Florida State. And in my opinion, the best team in the country right now are the Florida State Seminoles. Until someone knocks off the reigning champions, they should be number 1. They have the best quarterback in the country, Jameis Winston, who is money versus the blitz. Their defensive secondary is fast, they're athletic, and they can make plays on the ball. Yes, the offensive line needs a little bit of work, but right now they can run the football. They can do a solid job of protecting Jameis Winston, and he is money versus the blitz. So this is a very good football team on offense, defense, as well as special teams.